Hello and welcome to NewsReal with Joe and Neil.
I'm Joe.
And I'm Neil. And this week, midterm madness
Yes.
in the USA. It's the witching season, which is Halloween in some parts of the world. And already things are getting pretty freaky in the United States. With these series of incidents that we're going to be discussing today. You know what annoys me the most about US elections is that it never ends. I mean, in a way, it's nice and discreet. You know, every 4 years, presidential elections. In between that, we've got midterm elections. But it just never ends because we spent the last 2 years talking about the 2016 election. And now the next round is up. And, you know, before you know, they'll be talking about the run-up to the 2020 presidential election. It just never ends. It's like Groundhog Day, only it's more of a nightmare than anything romantic, or certainly not a comedy. It's funny sometimes. I suppose it's sometimes a comedy. So, yeah, mail bombs, migrant caravans, mass shootings. We kind of knew that there would be a few October surprises, or at least one.
Yeah, I mean, does anybody completely discount the idea that this is a bit coincidental? I mean, what was it? Was it last year or 2 years ago in the UK? You had the Westminster Bridge attack about 1 week or 10 days.
Last year
before the general election, when Theresa May put herself up. She had been shooed in as the UK Prime Minister, and so she called a snap election because she figured that she would get more votes. Just before that, you had this guy on Westminster Bridge knocking people down in his car and then stabbing people and stuff. And there were a lot of people at the time who said...
And the Manchester bombing.
And a lot of people at that time were sceptical of it, you know. I mean, when I say a lot of people, obviously, you can't get a good read on what everybody thought. It's very hard to get a good read on large numbers of people. But it seems that the idea that, you know, governments are interested, powerful people would try and weight the results of an important election, in their favour or against their opponent. That idea it's not so strange anymore, you know. I mean, it never should have been strange, because human nature, you know, means, motive, and opportunity. You know, the only thing that stops you believing or stops you accepting that they might do that is because some sense of, oh no, they wouldn't do that, you know, from some moral point of view.
And what's at stake is the reins of power.
Right, which is absolutely everything to those people.
Yeah. So
to say that someone wouldn't do something like that when everything in their lives, their own personal ambitions and everything that is important to them is at stake, it's irrational. That's the weird thing, is because of course these ideas are called conspiracy theories, and they're associated with irrationality, you know. But it's actually irrational to totally discount the idea that people in positions of, you know, really extreme power, or a lot of power, would not, if they decided that there was a good chance that they could influence something in their favor, that they wouldn't do it. Especially when when you're talking about the amount of power they have, and also the ability with that power to carry out some kind of an operation and also cover up for it. You know, they're the ones who would be investigating themselves, essentially. You know what I mean? So that they have a very low chance of exposure over it, except amongst the ordinary people in the world who might just go, "That's a bit coincidental, you know, there's something not quite right about that, you know." And that applies to all of these last these events in the US, you know, right, coming up to, how long is it now? Well, it's not
Tuesday week,
less than 2 weeks.
Yeah, next Tuesday. And the raging schizophrenia of it all. I mean, it's insane to suggest that powerful people or powerful interests might stage events, which isn't to say hoax now, stage as in they actually take place, or at least take advantage of them politically in advance of power being up for grabs, while simultaneously, for the last 2 years, 3 years really, it's been wall-to-wall conspiracy theory that the Russians are behind all this.
Right, there's something, that's a good point. It's something fairly schizophrenic about that.
Is it a conspiracy or not? So
you're allowed certain types of conspiracy theories that basically, you know, that make sense to you at this point. You know, there's a lot of people like, you know, anti-Trumpers totally happy with conspiracy theories that posit Trump at the center of a conspiracy up to no good.
A Russian agent.
Lying Russian agent, him and Putin, subverting our democracy. Basically, under Trump, America has basically been sold out completely to Russia. Russia pulls the strings, and Trump is basically pretending to be the president of the US, but he's actually working for Putin.
He's a traitor. He's pretending to be a patriot, and he's actually a traitor.
Right, but that's not just ordinary people who have put forward that idea. It's the entire US establishment, or a large part of the US establishment, including the establishment media. Like serious media like CNN have all, not maybe in those precise words, but to all intents and purposes have proposed that is the truth. And yet in the same breath, they'll turn around and say, which they have been saying over the past few days after this bombathon that went on, they've been, and after the synagogue shooting yesterday, they've been denouncing any, suggestions of there being a conspiracy behind this, or this was in some way planned or orchestrated and by someone to influence the results of the elections in 9 days. I mean, they're even. It's weird because particularly the guy, the synagogue shooter guy, he's been described as someone who is deep into conspiracy theories about the Jews, blah 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 blah. So even the person who carries out the attack is kind of downgraded. Like conspiracy theories are associated with the people who do mass shootings,
Mm-hmm.
But only that's in the mainstream interpretation of conspiracy theory. But CNN are allowed to peddle conspiracy theories themselves about Russia, and they're not crazy, apparently.
No. So let's start with that one. What's the story so far? I mean, it's only happened yesterday, but it's 11 dead now in a synagogue in Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh synagogue, yeah. Shouting anti-Semitic slurs, opened fire at a Pittsburgh synagogue.
And it's one guy.
Yeah.
And they caught him. Usually he's dead, but he's alive.
Right.
Arrested.
Right.
What he gave up.
Yeah. And I mean, he was on this website, what's it called, Gab?
Yeah, well, he has an account with Gab AI, which is basically an alternative to Twitter.
Right.
But it's obviously been bashed all these years because it has a less... Well, if I say less fascistic, it'll be polemic, but it have a less stringent community terms when it comes to kicking people off for their political views. And what they've been hit with, Gab, at the company, all these last few years, is that they allow Nazis and neo-Nazis and anti-Semites,
hate speech, etc.,
hate speech and racists and yada 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 to proliferate, and they don't take any action against them. Well, immediately, just today, actually, the internet service provider for Gab.ai has told them they're gone, their history. So as of Monday, they will have no hosting. They'll be down temporarily, if not permanently.
Right.
So Gab, the company, it's like saying Twitter is offline because someone had an account and posted something before. But how many times, how many incidents have there been? Mass shootings, terror attacks, whatever. ISIS took good advantage of Twitter all these years.
Right.
And in fact, there was a real suspicion that their accounts were not. In fact, no, there were statements years ago. Well, we're investigating these accounts, which were obviously ISIS, Black Flag, death to all Westerners. Well, we would take them down, but, free speech issues, and, we're not kind of reluctant to take them down.
Free speech for ISIS.
And then people did investigations, and they found that a lot of these accounts were actual bots tracked to Texas and California. Anyway, that's getting into conspiracy theories, so we won't go too far with that. But the double standard is reeks. I mean, it's just totally... So this guy, he is the shooter probably. One guy shoots up a synagogue. Oh, he's got a Gab. I can't write Gab, you're off the internet. Boom, bye-bye. Mm-hmm. That was quick.
That's a nice precedent.
Swift justice, I suppose.
It's a nice precedent to set as well for that to happen, in that way and that quickly. But he had, he'd been posting on this account, social media account, conspiracy theories, classic conspiracy theories about Jews. Jews rule the world. Jews control everything. Jews, but notably, and it's featured heavily in the reports on the shooting, is that he also said that, or he specifically said that the Jews were controlling Donald Trump, which obviously is very important to include because it puts him as a Trump supporter. He's not just a guy who's against Jews, he's a Trump supporter, So one of his rants was that the Jews are controlling Donald Trump.
Well, you see a lot of people posting stuff like that all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, these are people who were critical, maybe generally supportive of Trump. Oh, but he too is controlled by the Jews because they're like the most cynical of the cynics, where it's everything and everyone, and they see Trump try, they see him fail, or they see him being outwardly friendly towards Israel in policy and in word and deed and yada yada, and they go, well, ergo, there you go. I mean, but that's common. That's like, of course, what is not common is one of them then going to a synagogue and shooting up the place.
Yep. So it's all been centered around Trump, like the and what he is accused of being, like that divisive character and a racist and all this kind of stuff. These last events, the bombathon, obviously. Well, actually, on the same day, before we get to the bombathon, on the same day as the synagogue shooter in Pittsburgh, there was a shooting in Jefferson, Kentucky, a town called Jefferson, Kentucky. It was a white guy, basically, tried to get into a predominantly black First Baptist church to shoot the place up, and he couldn't get in. The door was, he tried to pull it open a couple of times, banged on it, but it was secured, so he couldn't get in. So he went to a grocery store nearby and shot 2 black people. Now, it's interesting because if he had got into that church on the same day, you would have had 2 religious places of religious worship shootings by white people.
Extremists. White too.
By white guys, and both in the context of, what Trump is accused of, what Trump is accused of inciting, hate speech, hate crimes, division within the society, extreme politics, right-wing politics, i.e. anti-Jews, anti-blacks, white people shooting blacks and stuff,
So a narrative that could be constructed with both of them roughly the same, whatever their actual support for Trump. And then there have been other incidents over the years too. The Charleston shooter, that kid, Dylan Roof, he might precede Trump, but it was the same thing. Extreme,
it's part of a
white racist against black. Have there been any incidents where there have been explicitly lefty, pro-democrat, pro-multiculturalism, pro-open society shooters doing crazy things? There was one guy in a church in Texas.
Yeah.
But they didn't ham that up too much, that he had all these lefty affiliations.
Right.
There was an open question on that because that one happened. That was weird because that happened 24 hours after Las Vegas shooting. So that Las Vegas, I think it was close in time, but Las Vegas totally dominated the news. Then let's just assume then, without really being sure of it, I mean, people will be able to find exceptions, but the general trend is of
supposedly right-wing people.
Supposedly right-wing.
Whatever right-wing means.
Whatever their characterization of the typical Trump supporter is, does some atrocity. Ergo, Trump / anything Trump's representing is bad, it's divisive, it's murderous, it's Nazi, it tends towards destabilization. It's bad for the country. That's the kind of overall message that's been hit here. Right. Okay.
The official, the normal, or the narrative would be that Trump has emboldened a lot of these people, this element within society that was always going to, or had always held these views. These kind of right wing, whatever, conservative. I mean, you throw those terms around, and they don't really mean anything. But people who are conservative, Christian, let's say, that Trump has emboldened those people, and he has. It's his fault, really, because of supposedly his rhetoric, whatever, that has given, courage to these people to come out and be more vocal in their, in standing up for their rights, let's say, up to and including kind of shooting people and stuff, But of course, that's not even true, because that kind of division in society, in American society, has been there for a long time,
Yeah.
And I don't think Trump has, it's not, I think if there's any truth to that, it's not that Trump has given anybody courage or has emboldened those kind of people. It's more that the lefty pushback and the demonization of Trump, the unreasonable, irrational demonization of Trump, is what has pushed people who are Trump supporters or conservatives to take action, let's say, to take affirmative personal action, up to and including kind of going postal type thing. So that's closer to the official narrative, let's say, of what's going on, that America is just divided anyway. And those divisions have, in recent years, become much more sharply defined. But that still doesn't explain why someone would, go and shoot up unless they were mentally unstable, And of course, there's another aspect to this, obviously, which is that these people can be put up to doing those kind of things. I mean, it's another. We're deep, or where we just jump deep into conspiracy theory with this idea of people being manipulated in one way or another, having their head messed with, to the point that they would actually go and shoot up a church or a supermarket or whatever. Well, I mean that, but the problem with that is being extreme conspiracy theory and kind of crazy conspiracy theory is that there are official documents and evidence, and it's in websites like Wired, official technology websites, that have no problem publishing this and have published it, that US intelligence agencies, the police force, the military, whatever, all of them have been involved in developing long before now, but it's been in development for so long that it's become kind of mainstream. I suppose, for want of a better word, they're kind of called crowd control devices, or crowd control weapons, essentially. That they become so mainstream that they're mounted on the back of police trucks at riots or protests or demonstrations, whatever, in America and in other countries, but predominantly America. America seems to spearhead this kind of technology, and included in this, and it's invariably around, other than the usual stuff that's been around for ages, like water cannons and rubber bullets and smoke grenades and CS gas and stuff, the new kind of tranche of crowd control devices are largely microwave based. It's a microwave pulse that's emitted from one of these devices, and it can have all sorts of different effects. It can be modulated in one way or another to have different effects. It can burn people's skin from quite a great distance. It can create an intense burning sensation on your skin. It can make you vomit. It can make you wet yourself. It can, and one of the other ones that's included just as a matter of course in this list of effects that they can have is that a voice can be projected using this device. Voices can be projected into a person's head. You can record your voice and have it projected directly into a group of people's heads or into one specific person's head, if you can isolate one specific person. So effectively, that person can hear voices in their head that you can project, and it's and they've done tests. I mean, you can read about it on the web on reputable websites like Wired.com, where they even they set up the device from a certain distance, and you're talking hundreds of meters here. Is for a man-portable device, you can project a voice 100 meters away into another person's head, kind of using their cranium as a receiver or resonator, and they put devices beside the person to recording device to see if the recording devices would pick up anything, could hear the voice that was being transmitted, and the recording devices picked up nothing. But the test subject, who was part of the experiment, stated that he could hear every single word that was meant to be said to him from 300 meters different distance, completely inaudibly, until it gets into his head. So that point is that technology of making people hear voices in their head is not science fiction. It's not conspiracy theory. Go and look it up yourself if you want. It's part of very well understood technology at this point in time. So then we get back to what we were saying earlier on the show about means, motive, and opportunity for people who want to do something, want to create a certain effect, or create a certain situation that they believe would, increase their positions or their powers, or get something that they want, for themselves. In this case, is there any evidence that, turning the population against Trump, or creating these kind of situations of mass shooters, people going carrying out mass shootings, or even sending bombs in the mail, does that serve any powerful interests in the US today? If you conclude that it does, well, then you have no problem in going to the kind of, you've got the means, you've no problem filling in the motive and opportunity. Opportunity being the technical know-how to do it. No problem.
No problem. It reminds me of the naval yard shooter in DC, 2013.
Right.
A black guy, former Marine, I think he was discharged. He had issues, but he was telling his psychiatrist before he carried it out that he was hearing voices. No one else could hear them. And even more specific stuff than that. I don't recall the details, but
I think he actually said that the FBI or the CIA or name some intelligence agency were speaking to him in his head, or that they were projecting voices into his head. He was very specific about that. He almost got down to the point of saying that they were doing this to him, And it's funny because that's, the person who says that, they're dismissed as schizophrenic or crazy, But then you just look and you find that there is actually a technology to do precisely that. The thing that guy was suffering back in 2013, 5 years ago. And yet you're meant to dismiss it as completely crazy, but it's not completely crazy. It's like saying that, it's like describing a TV to someone. And the person saying, that's completely crazy. What, pictures on the screen? People talking on the screen, talking to you, you can hear their voices and they're not there. They're on a screen in front of you and you can see them. That's not, are you schizophrenic? But you're talking about a TV.
Mm-hmm.
But, well, it's exactly the same, but it is absolutely 100% normal at this point, normal run-of-the-mill technology to make a person hear voices in their head.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely understood how it can be done and has been done and tested. So, someone gets a hold of this and targets one person over a period of a few months, tormenting them day and night with voices in their head, telling them to do something. Why they go and do it?
So the means are absolutely
God
there.
told me to do it, whatever.
Means are there for sure. Motive, well, obviously what we just discussed, powers at stake, but also motive. Think about how they spent the last if we include the campaign, 3 years bashing anyone who would vote for Trump and thus support him as crazies, as deplorables.
Mm.
So imagine now you're in the opposite camp and you're worried about this Trump phenomenon, and you're worried right now about it manifesting as the red wave of support for a Republican. If you see them as such, what might you do? You might stir up the crazies, and you would have some success rate because there's a partial truth to what you've been telling the whole population, that there are actual crazies among people who would support and vote for Trump.
Right.
And then you hitch them. You basically, you do in some way influence that you carry out an influence operation and you control their actions. Not to the nth degree, but you fire it out there and you see what sticks and you get some success.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely the motive at in the grand strategy sense and in the specific way of getting crazies to act out as you would like them to.
Mm-hmm.
They're both there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So on the bombathon.
The bombathon, what do we make of that? I mean, that was now with 13 people receive.
It's funny, like an aging Chippendale guy. He used to be a Chippendale, male stripper. Yeah, bodybuilder, male stripper type thing, gyrating on I'm living obviously, I suppose the career prospects for, out of work Chippendales or Chippendales who are past their expiry date. Basically, the career prospects aren't the best. Apparently this guy anyway lived in a trailer, pretty disheveled kind of. He's not itinerant, but he wasn't living in a respectable way. Basically, let's say.
Didn't they track him to a condo in Florida?
Yeah.
That was his mother's, though.
It was his mother's, but he had a trailer, I think, as well.
Okay.
So not, just a ne'er-do-well kind of person. Probably lots of.
Oh, well, he's got a criminal history.
Lots of, criminal history.
We've got the photo up on SOT at the moment. It's a montage of all his mugshots as he gets older. There's 6 of them.
Right.
What about crimes? Petty stuff.
Mm.
I think he's a Brooklyn native.
Right.
Registered voter of Trump's Republican since 2016.
Right.
Turns up at Trump rallies.
Was a Democrat before that.
Right.
Registered Democrat before that.
Now, the link with him is that they found in two of these packages his DNA.
Fingerprint. One fingerprint, I think.
And some other piece of DNA.
Maybe some DNA, but yeah.
Is he just a crazy who went off? It's very premeditated.
Sending packages that aren't actually bombs, that just look like bombs. I mean, it's been trolled on the
internet. And hitting the high notes of exactly who it was. Brennan, De Niro, the people who've had the most attention and never Trumpers in these last some years.
Yeah, he was a bit obsessed, obviously.
Soros.
If this was him, yeah. Soros, yeah, that's going pretty far, Soros, But making up these dodgy bombs that really weren't, they weren't bombs in any real sense of the word.
Well, that's it. None of them went off.
Well, they had timers on them, but they weren't actually bombs. So why would you put a timer on something that wasn't actually a bomb? Obviously, you're trying to just fake something. It's like anybody just trying to make something that looks like a bomb. Get something, get a blob of, plastic or something, a plastic lunchbox, put some stuff in it, wrap some wires around it, put a timer on it, leave some wires sticking out, and send it to someone. It's not going to do anything. It's a lunchbox with a timer on it, basically, and some wires. It's not going to do anything. But so that's weird, because he didn't really mean to kill those people, obviously, because he knew it wasn't a bomb, right? He's not that stupid. If he can put it together, he knows it's not actually a bomb. He didn't have any explosives.
So this diehard Trump supporter just hit Republicans in the polls.
Big time, yeah.
Inadvertently.
But that's how crazy it is, yeah. That's supposedly how nutty he is. Like, he's so stupid that he doesn't realize that this would have a very bad effect on his supposed favorite candidate, or his party, in the polls, that it would hit them pretty hard. So he just didn't think that far ahead. He was just reacting. He's just angry at all these Democrats and John Brennan and Robert De Niro.
Maxine Waters. CNN proper.
Right. And he wasn't smart enough to know that none of those people actually open their own mail. The vast majority of them have mail that's vetted by someone else first. So he was never going... Not only was he not going to do any damage because they weren't actually bombs, but even if they were bombs, he wouldn't have actually killed those people or wouldn't have hurt them in any way because they don't open their mail. So the only tangible effect that he could ever possibly have had would be to make Trump and the Republican Party look bad.
On the eve of midterm elections.
So either he's crazy enough and stupid enough to do that and be such a doofus that he would do that, which is possible because, there are very stupid people out there, or someone else kind of put him up to it who wanted to achieve that result.
Yeah. I want to make a small detour just to, American listeners will, of course, be familiar with what's at stake. But just for any international peeps watching this, so the midterm elections, there are 535 seats up for grabs. That's the entire House of Representatives, which is the lower house in U.S. Congress. 435 of those 535 are for the lower house. And then a third of the upper house, the Senate, a third of those seats are up for election. That's 33 out of 100. In addition, some 36 of the 50 U.S. states are electing governors. As it stands, the Republicans, they currently have the full House. They control everything. The White House, of course, because Trump's there, both chambers in the Congress, and then a large majority of state governors. This current one, polls, I know polls, but here we go. The polls at the moment have the Republicans ahead of Democrats, although they've just taken a hit because of all this bad press for anything Republican, anything Trump, really. The pollster 538 website, they aggregate lots of other polls, a huge selection actually. They currently have the Republicans with a high chance, an 82-point-something% chance that the Republicans will keep the Senate, the upper house. However, they say the Democrats have an equivalent percentage chance, 85% chance of winning control of the lower house, the House of Representatives. That's where things officially are. However, we know since at least 2016 that scientific polls are about as reliable as Hillary not coughing long enough to appear healthy. So, polls, yeah, I don't like the sound of that. Where one will win one house and the other one will win the other one. As if to suggest things are nicely poised. My hunch is that they're not poised at all. That anything anti-Trump, which means anything Democrat, which is unfair because there are some actual Democrat politicians who are not violent anti-Trumpers. They're cooperating with him on a number of things. Tulsi Gabbard comes to mind and her position on U.S. Foreign policy. But basically anything Democrat is associated when it comes down to a simple left-right, one party or the other issue in U.S. elections. Anything pro-Trump is really anything Republican, and anything anti-Trump is anything Democrat. So, given that simple black-white position that's on offer to American voters, I can't see really anything less than a clean sweep for the Republican Party on each of these levels. I was thinking that for some weeks now, and given that all of this stuff has happened we suggest, whether it's by design or it's just come about because of the general state of hysteria and division in the United States. Let's go with either or. It still doesn't make sense to me how someone, a deviant mind, lining up a series of events, hoping to swing the election a certain way, how it works in their favor. Because, I mean, we saw what happened initially. Before they named the guy Cesar Sayok as being behind the mail bombs, there was about 3 or 4 days of it being in the news. Mm-hmm. And immediately the two camps bifurcated into their sides, with obviously the CNN and the liberal press and the Never Trumpers saying, throwing up the hands saying, see, that's Trump's America. See what we got to do? We got to de-Trumpify this country to save it. And then on the other side, immediately going, well, this is obviously a liberal conspiracy. Mm-hmm. So right. Straight into conspiracy land. Mm-hmm. So what are they were they hoping to swing some people from one camp over to doing whatever it takes to contain Trump? I get in enough Democrats so that's the theory, by the way, that the reason the US has these midterms is that in principle, when one president of one party gets in 2 years' time, he'll be balanced, or she will be balanced out by a move back the other way. Mm. And therefore, the system remains stable. But we could be looking at here quite the opposite. And this is also what's at stake, because the Never Trumpers will be desperate to get control of at least certainly the House of Representatives, mm-hmm. because then they can stop Trump.
They can potentially impeach Trump.
And potentially impeach him sometime in the remaining 2 years. Mm-hmm. And because the alternative is their worst nightmare, Trump has basically free sailing to 2020, and he's much more likely to pass what he wants to pass. Mm-hmm. So, my question, is it what it appears to be, that these events have been injected in right here to sway the electorate to vote a certain way, i.e. to vote against anything Trump wants, therefore for Democrats? Mm-hmm. Is that basically it in a nutshell? Because, I mean, they must be, I mean, if there's the kind of cunning people who can come up with schemes, they know how people think, they're surely aware of how things can backfire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think there's a fail-safe for those people, the people who are really behind those kind of operations, and I would definitely lean towards this being a manipulated event. The bombathon and even the Jewish shooting, most of those kind of events are manipulated in some way for some purpose. And ultimately what you see is, we've had many such events previous to that, going back over the past 10 or 15 years, and the end result has never been those. When you carry out some kind of event like that, you can't be sure of like you're saying, it can go wrong, or you can't be sure of the exact result from the people, But I think the people who carry this out, or orchestrate these kind of attacks, or help to orchestrate them, that they have a bigger agenda that's being serviced, and that bigger agenda is that they're happy for the population to be divided. Simply to keep the population divided. It's kind of party politics. You need to have for the kind of two-party system that predominates in most European countries and the US. You want to have division perpetually between those two, because it's easy. You just switch it around from one to the next and one to the other, And it's only 4 years for a lot of presidents, or maximum 8 years in the US. In European countries, it's the same, It's very short terms, So any president or any administration can never really do much, in terms of affecting any long-term change to the country, because they're only there for a very short period of time, But there's other people who, that are called the deep state, and that's just a term to describe the well-known kind of unelected career officials in every Western country and in the US as well, who really do pull the strings, because they've been there since they were 20 years old, you know what I mean? And they're now 60 years old, they've been there for 40 years or 50 years type thing, And they're there to maintain stability, to maintain the country on a certain course as administrations come and go, Because the very idea that you would have a change in administration every 4 years potentially, it's a recipe for chaos, no? Like kind of what Trump is accused of doing and other presidents are being accused of doing is as soon as they get into power, they undo what the previous president did, especially if it's from a different party, you know. I mean, that just sounds like a recipe for chaos. You never get anything done. One guy does something in 4 years, it barely gets going, a new administration comes in, he undoes it, tries to get his thing going, he only has a few years to do it, then the next one comes in and undoes what. How are you meant to ever achieve it? Obviously, the country runs behind the scenes there successfully, and there are people who are in charge of making sure it runs. And I mean, look at foreign policy, American foreign policy and other European country foreign policies. They don't change. Particularly American foreign policy does not change, hasn't changed in decades. Because someone is running American foreign policy, there's a vision of America and how America's role in the world, and there's no chance that anybody would ever come in and upend that. Primarily because the CIA, for a very long time, going back to the middle of the last century, it has been there. They've taken to themselves the role of directing and organizing American foreign policy, pursuing American foreign policy, and it's got a very clear objective. It's America controlling as much of it, spreading its influence, and being the world's policeman and protecting influencing as much of the world as possible, getting their fingers in as many pies as possible, and that's always been American foreign policy. And no president has ever come along and changed that, because first of all, they haven't been able to, and most of them ideologically don't have a problem with that. Yeah, let's spread America's influence all around the world. But interestingly, the only person who has actually come along since that long-term CIA-directed foreign policy, the only person who's come along to change that or has shown that he wanted to change is Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's a big part of the shitstorm that happened even before he got elected. And since he had elected, I mean, it came from the deep state, that unelected career diplomats and bureaucrats within the establishment who, ideologically did not like the idea that didn't like Trump's ideas of changing America's vision of the world and America in the world from an expansionist one to an isolationist one. And Trump, nobody disagrees that Trump is pursuing an isolationist policy. His MAGA, his Make America Great or Put America First or whatever, is an isolationist policy. It's forget about the rest of the world. Let's focus as much as possible on America and doing what America needs, doing for America what it needs, infrastructure, jobs, blah, 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 blah. Bizarre that they would have such a bad reaction to a president saying, let's really focus on how we can increase jobs, employment in America, and increase, let's build up our infrastructure, deal with our ailing infrastructure. And they crap their pants, because that means he obviously, a president does have some potential or some ability to kind of like pursue that, even over the period of 4 years or 8 years. You can make some inroads in that direction. You can redirect funds from sending them out around the world to facilitate, National Endowment for Democracy and USAID, and sending troops overseas and sending, bolstering intelligence operations overseas. Take a lot of that money away from the military-industrial complex, effectively, and put it back home into America. Take it away from overseas, And they really, really didn't like that. They crapped their pants, and that, I think, is a major part of everything we've seen happening since Trump became president. All the screaming and crying and shouting and divisiveness. So if you want to blame someone for the divisiveness in America that has accelerated under Trump, you have to look to the people who have been orchestrating this campaign against him and setting people. And of course, they want to leverage people in their war, their fight against Trump and trying to stop him from doing anything that he wants to do. They're going to leverage the population, and create chaos, effectively, social chaos as much as possible in America, because that effectively hamstrings his presidency, because it gives him problems. You know what I mean? It's like every day he's having to, instead of concentrating on doing whatever he wants to do, he has to concentrate on these issues. He's being attacked by the press repeatedly, has to answer. Just take up a person's time with defending themselves rather than letting them get on with just quietly get on and do a job,
Trump wants jobs for the millions of people in the United States who already were not themselves, most of them or many of them, not long ago, immigrants, newly arrived. Let's get them working. And the response is open borders. Let's get millions more in. That brings up the third M in our title, mass migration. Is this a coincidence as well?
Oh, you have to blame George Soros for that. Soros, he's the one who he's blamed for pretty much every over the past 5 or 6 years. He's blamed for every mass movement of people anywhere. It's Soros is leading them. He's at the head of these groups of immigrants that have been spreading around in different places, leading them on a string. Come this way. So chaos here. Multiculturalism, diversity in this country. Why? Because Soros just loves diversity. I don't know.
Are you mocking this idea, or?
That's the narrative. But I mean, is that what Soros is all about? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know enough about George Soros. I never heard him say explicitly that that's what he's all about. You know what I mean? Apparently, officially, he's just a kind of a stock market guy who's made crap load of money on the stock market, investing and stuff. And his Open Society Foundation.
Someone dumped a lot of dirt. There was a whole set of emails leaked in 2015 amongst the Podesta emails and or the DNC. Is the DNC emails, the Podesta emails? I've forgotten. But there was a whole batch that were from Soros organization, Open Society. And yeah, it is pretty much spelled out what they want to do.
But it doesn't talk about financing hordes of migrants from moving from one country to another. I mean, his Open Society Foundation stuff is pretty well known as well, which is promoting democracy. So very much in line with America's promotion of democracy around the world. Soros was directly involved in the Maidan revolution in Ukraine. His money was in there as well, but so was American state money. American taxpayers' money was in there.
State Department
was to promote
that PayPal guy, Omidar.
Was to overthrow governments, and to promote American interests in countries. So if there's a leader in a country that America doesn't like, isn't playing the ball or playing the game the way America likes, then Soros seems to be, there is pretty strong evidence that he is ideologically aligned, let's say, with the US State Department as an expansionist, as a vehicle for American expansionism and overthrowing governments around the world and stuff. So yes, but when it comes to the migrant thing, it takes it to another level, like in the case of these migrants coming from Central America. Soros, it's put at the feet of Soros as well. Is he financing that? I mean, is he handing out money? I mean, there's a lot of dodgy stuff going on. I mean,
well, there's one specific thing linking a Soros organization to this migrant caravan. I think it's uncontested. It's a group, an NGO called Skylight, which is embedded with the caravan to nominally to document the event. So there is and they got $1 million or something. So there is Soros activity, definitely,
right, that
can be tied on paper to this particular caravan.
So what's his agenda in doing that?
I don't know, but look at they're going to arrive on the border probably the next few days, right before the midterms, and that gives. You're talking about giving Trump problems. What's he going to do? The mother of all issues, right. The most divisive issue right now that you could bring up, because it brings in racism,
migrants,
power, foreigners versus natives.
Right.
It's everything, right?
It's very coincidental, that's happening right now.
Right, it comes to a head right now.
I mean, what are the odds,
And it's not like this.
First time.
Have there been any previous ones?
There have been, is the thing.
To this scale?
No, but I mean, it doesn't.
Constant trickle of people.
Right, but it doesn't excuse the fact that the media should have been making. Why is the media making such a big issue of this one? Sure, it may have been facilitated and made it possible for the media to make a big issue of this because there's a lot more people in this one. But I mean, the media have reported, I suppose, in smaller ways on migrant influx from and same type people come from the same place. This isn't just one group of people as one discrete block. I mean, obviously there are people who have come before them, there are people who come after them. But you don't hear about really the ones who have come before from the same places, the same type of people, and you won't hear about the ones who came after the elections. You won't hear about any more people coming in. It's just right now, big chunk of people facilitated to move towards the border. Yeah, so it's very suspicious. I mean, if you don't have a skeptical bone in your body, you're in trouble. I mean, you got to be skeptical about this stuff. When coincidences upon coincidences pile up, at what point do you go, that's too many coincidences? You know.
There is one video was tweeted out by a Republican senator congressman for Texas, Matt Gaetz. He published, basically shared, someone else found it and put it up there, video of women and children in this caravan while they were still in Honduras being handed out cash.
Well, but I mean, I think I looked at that video and it didn't look like it was cash because it was being given to kids, it was being given to everybody. You know,
food tokens or something.
Something like that. Something. That, you know, you want to jump at. You know, I'm pretty careful about jumping at kind of like that that kind of stuff. You know, because when there are people obviously who want to expose this. You know, actual conspiracy sites, let's say, but they go way too far, you know, and they're jumping at everything
because they're starting with the belief that this is all.
Let me look for the
being
evidence.
Directed and controlled. Right. So, look there. Okay,
yeah,
right.
It's similar to the kind of mass shootings, the Sandy Hook, and the was it Tampa shooting nightclub? Not Tampa, Orlando shooting and stuff where people were seeing. And the Boston bombings and stuff, people seeing fake blood, people seeing, you know, actors basically pretending to limp down the road, blah, 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 because they're starting with this really hardcore belief that this is fake, you know, and it's fake, like you said earlier on the show. It's not that it's actually happening. Mm-hmm. It's just the person who is accused of doing it single-handedly, it's very unlikely that person had no help. Mm-hmm. And so then you get into who is helping him.
Yeah.
And that takes it. But absolutely, the people who carry out these kind of who facilitate these kind of events in whatever way, whether it's migrants coming to the border or if it's some shooting or whatever, they know they're not the kind of people who are going to just pretend, you know, who are going to go to the bother of faking the entire thing with crisis actors and all that kind of nonsense, basically. Because why would they? Because it's much more impactful if they actually traumatize people. Because it's not just the people involved in one of those shootings or one of those bombings, that the people who actually get injured and killed, it's not just those people who are affected. There's thousands of people around who are all watching in the environment, and they need to be traumatized as well. You know, you need to spread that very real trauma as far and wide as possible. So, anyway, it's just a non-starter, that idea of crisis actors and stuff. It's complete nonsense, really, you know. And it actually serves to kind of tarnish any suggestion or to rubbish any suggestion that there's something more to these kind of events than meets the eye. You know, it's like taking it to the extreme. When you say, no, you don't need to go to an extreme. You don't need to pretend say that it didn't happen or that it's fake blood and fake actors. You can come back to the allegation that this one guy who, you know, had never picked up a gun in his life or something suddenly went down and activated his Rambo microchip and was able to shoot, you know, dozens of people in a matter of 5 minutes. You just come to that and go, he probably had some help. Probably didn't do it on his own.
Probably was messed with.
In some way or the help, yeah. Someone he had a team backing him, you know.
Have they named the synagogue shooter?
I think so.
I'm wondering, is he similar or different? What kind of background does he have compared with Caesar Sayok, the guy who was fingered for the mail bombs? Because I mean, in that case, that guy had a history, and he's got mugshots all over the place. Mm-hmm. And you know, his bio's out there. I'm wondering about the synagogue guy.
Yeah, I've only seen a picture of him.
Maybe it's early days.
No, actually, no. I have his name. His name's Bowers, actually. Robert Bowers, 46, and was identified as a gunman and arrested. Frequently expressed his disdain for Jews on social media. Probably like a 50-year-old white guy.
Right.
Kind of chubby, on Gab, as you know, all that kind of stuff. Yep. Definitely someone who could have been influenced as well, you know, very easily.
They're all individually, all of these things are plausibly just happened in this environment, you know. Because, I mean, how many mass shootings have there been?
Too many to count.
So, yeah.
Almost.
It's weird that the most violent of the three so far, mass shooting in the synagogue yesterday, is the one that's most plausibly, well, that could just be spontaneous. Because it happens every other week in the United States. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then it gets a little less plausible with the non-violent attacks on precisely like among the top 20 people that hardcore Trump supporters would like to see in jail, if not bumped off.
Right.
And then they're exactly the people who are
it's just
held up as, under attack by...
the main motivation...
And democracy is under attack.
The main motivation of this thing is to divide...
The
main motivation of these attacks, the main result, let's say, and therefore I ascribe that motivation to them when I see what result they have, is to divide people, is to push people further, to divide the country and divide American society as much as possible. Maybe up to the point of, some kind of actual civil war of some description. Obviously, America's a big country. It's hard to imagine how you had a civil war across the whole country. But in breaking out in various places, reprisal attacks, all that kind of stuff. Take it up to that point, and if someone has the intention to go there, then that's these kind of events are what push it there, because these guy, the Jewish conspiracy guy, or the bombathon guy, it posits, by identifying them as effectively Trump supporters, it identifies or defames, let's say, all people who support Trump or who are conservative. Let's say even more broadly in the country, all conservatives in the country are these kind of crazy people. It's by association, you're tarring everybody else and sending that message to the anti-Trumpers, who then feel more justified in raising the level of the rhetoric against them, because they're literally inhuman. They're basically the people who go and just massacre people. That's who Trump supporters are. If you can get people on the left to really believe that all Trump supporters are potential mass murderers, well, how they're much more likely to take extreme action against them themselves, And hey presto, you've got a mini, or the beginnings of a kind of civil war, where you have groups of people arming themselves and shooting each other on ideological grounds.
Do you remember we interviewed? I think maybe it was our colleagues who did it. They interviewed a former U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia. He's written a couple of books. One of them was about his dismay in the 1990s when he was in Riyadh, rubber stamping all these guys, dodgy guys, going to the United States for paramilitary training. And the suspicion later confirmed that a number of them became Al-Qaeda. That's one of his stories. But then he wrote more recently about the concept of directed migration. It wasn't him who coined the term. In the aftermath of the 2015 million plus wave of people going from Syria and elsewhere and allowed into Germany, he published this book. He got the term from some US specialist think tanker. It's a woman's name, I forget it, but she had the term apparently common in whatever circle she moves in, called directed migration, discussing the concept in the context of giving leaders in other countries issues to think about, how they could take advantage of or capitalize on naturally arising crises of migration that come about from war, famine, hunger, natural disasters, whatever the case may be.
Use it as a weapon.
And you could weaponize it, right? So that's probably the kind of ballpark here where it's not that it's completely contrived or stimulated or whipped up by a Soros type, evil character in his lair. But it's capitalized, mediatized. We all kind of remember what kicked off the 2015 wave and the sympathy for them. It was that photo of the kid who washed up on a beach in Turkey. I mean, that was real. The kid died and it's tragic. But as we pointed out at the time, where were all of you people the last 4 years when kids were washing up in beaches in Spain and Italy? And anyway,
why were you not denouncing the cause of that of that child washing up on the beach, i.e., a US backed and its allies and its Gulf, its Saudi friends, promoting or fomenting war
in Libya and then Syria,
in Libya and Syria that causes the migrant. This didn't say a word about it. I mean, when the US and its allies, or certain aspects within the US, the CIA, etc., intelligence agencies in different countries in Europe and in America, were in the process of creating the conditions that would lead to that kid washing up on the beach, the media was fully behind them, backing them, talking about Assad's an evil dictator, supporting the war, supporting the invasion, basically, of jihadis into Syria to overrun the country, calling them rebels, fully behind them. And then when you get the obvious result of that, which is, well, you've destroyed the country, Libya and Syria, or attempted to destroy it and kill large numbers of people and rendered a lot of the country uninhabitable, people leave that area and seek safe havens, i.e. they come, in the case of Syria and Libya, they come north and west, or west and north into Europe, i.e. or, well, leading to some kids washing up, or children washing up on the beach. And then, only then do you decry it. Mm-hmm. And kind of like tug at the heartstrings of the population. To what about this poor baby? But you, the media, were actually supporting the conditions that led to his death. So you were for his death before he died, and then when he dies, you're against it, and you're effectively trying to, in a way, blame the people in Western countries for allowing this to happen, because it's put in the context of the immigrants, drowning at sea and stuff, is put in the or in the US, not letting them over the border is put in the context of people who are anti-immigrant. The reason that those people died in Mexico from starvation, or on the trip to Mexico, or trying to get to the US, died of starvation, or the reason people drowned in the sea and stuff, is because
Trump has no heart.
Trump has no heart, or European leaders no heart, or the right in Europe who are anti-immigrant in certain countries have no heart. But it's like, where was your heart when that kid was being forced out of his country because of your backing for the people who forced him out of his country? It's just, there's so much hypocrisy in it. It's ridiculous, and I mean,
this strikes me as basically the same thing happening now to the United States as happened to Europe, particularly Germany, in 2015. I know it's been ongoing and so on, but this kind of volume of people in one go, the migrant caravan, the theme building up, it's in the media nonstop. It's basically, and we said at the time, well, it's okay for the US to take sides on this, on what was happening in Europe, but this will never happen over there. Well, it kind of has on a smaller scale.
Well, yeah. America's a bigger place.
I just thought of a reason why this could be Trump's doing. I don't actually think it is, but think about it. What got Trump elected? The one thing, I mean, if there's one thing, migration. A bit like Brexit. If there was one thing that the English were like, no, we don't want any more of them. Mexicans, migration, Latin Americans. And how hard would it be for Trump to take advantage of this politically? Because if they come up right before the elections on November 6th, if he's already said, I'm going to send the National Guard. We're going to physically stop him coming through. Is that meant to hurt his image? It may be in the minds of the liberal elites, but you've got to understand the American voters expect him to do that because that's why they're putting him in office. It's only going to increase his standing with them.
Amongst his demographic, yeah. And he doesn't care about the ones who have been anti-Trumpers even before he got elected and since he got elected, because there's nothing he could do that would change their minds, really. And he's not willing to make enough of the sacrifice that he would have to make to his vision to appease the left in America, right? So they're never going to like Trump. He's not going to do anything that will make them like him, so they're never going to like him. So he doesn't have to pander to them at all. So he has no reason to change his stance on immigration, and every reason to specifically in relation to the migrant caravan coming up to the Mexico border. He has no reason to back down on that. He has every reason to actually hold his ground and say, yeah, they're not getting in, I'm going to send the National Guard. Because he'll get a round of applause from all of the people who already support him. Plus, he'll probably attract some more, because there's probably a lot of people who are of a kind of conservative, mind, if you know what I mean. They lean towards conservatism, and they might think that's a good idea as well. And then they'll support him, So,
and additionally, if something is contrived to force him into doing something he doesn't want to do, and then his base is like, oh, you betrayed us. And they go back to screaming about him being controlled by the Jews or something. He still has opportunity to take advantage of it, because he can say, well, look what they've blocked us from doing these last 2 years. there would be a wall, or there would be means in place, or the laws would be changed or upheld simply because there's plenty of laws already in the books. And this situation wouldn't have happened. Those people wouldn't have had the attraction to try and come, or they could have been physically stopped by an actual border wall, which he's wanted. And then they won't allow for the budget for it. So it's total. If that was a political strategy, it's totally shooting the Democrat, liberal, lefty elites in the foot. It's backfiring. But I think it's like you said, though. The bottom line is that the part of the difficulty of trying to find agency in this, and therefore strategy and intention, is that ultimately there seems that the bottom line for the powers that work against Trump is that, as far as they see it, they win either way. I mean, in Europe in 2015, the bottom line was that Europe was divided. And that's continuing to play out and amplify, even if they've actually reverted back to the previous border status. In some places, borders were literally put up, like in Hungary, in some places. But in most places, it was simply that they got over the temporary madness and upheld the previous existing border controls and asylum processes and so on. So it's reverted back to the status quo. But there was a brief window of insanity where,
let them all
or deliberate selection, let them all in. But the bottom line is that the ramifications of that are divisiveness. And it's getting worse by the day. Jesus Christ. 2 days ago, there was another extreme case in the same city where a German teenager, a 19-year-old, had been raped and murdered by a child migrant who, in his trial, when convicted last year, turned out to be 33 years old, an Afghani. She was the daughter of a European Commission official, a German citizen, living back in Freiburg in the south of Germany. She herself was a pro-migrant activist and helper in one of these camps outside the city, raped and killed. Anyway, 2 days ago, another incident, another teenager, an 18-year-old, was raped, gang raped. She wasn't killed in this case, but by seven Syrian migrants who live in one of these temporary shelters outside the same city of Freiburg. So, and I just, oh my God, when I heard that, I thought, AFD's, popularity just went up 4 or 5 percentage points overnight. Now, it's not explosive. It's not like they're about to sweep to power, but it's the underlying thing is this divisiveness. It's only going to amplify everything.
Yeah, and like I said earlier on, it's to distract attention away from the source of these problems. The immigrants, nobody's going to disagree, I think, left or right. So obviously the right would agree, but you could probably get people on the left to agree as well, that taking large numbers of people from a war zone, a long-running war zone, like people who have been traumatized themselves, taking lots of young people, unattached from their parents or whatever, and letting them come into a foreign country where they don't speak the language, they don't know the culture very well, etc., and just letting them kind of like run more or less free in the streets, which they do. And that's probably a bad idea because these are traumatized people. It's like I don't want to be, insulting or, heartless about it, but it's kind of like opening up the doors of an asylum and letting the people run through the streets. To some extent, obviously the vast majority of refugees aren't like that, but there's going to be, the greater the number, the greater percentage, the small percentage is going to be quite a lot of people who are damaged, you know, and who are of criminal mind. And it's like opening the doors of a prison in your country and letting them run around. And nobody's saying that you can't bring in or help refugees, but there has to be a limit to it. But that also misses the point that this refugee situation would not be happening if Western powers had not invaded and destroyed and blown the crap out of countries like Libya and Syria and Iraq before it. It wouldn't happen. So there would be no question. There wouldn't be any debate over it. You wouldn't have to have more right-wing or more left-wing people kind of like arguing over whether or not to let immigrants in and who they should let in and stuff if you didn't blow the shit out of the country in the first place. And it's your leaders, your Western leaders, who blew the crap out of those countries and caused the... So why don't you address the issue, the source of the issue? Why doesn't everybody, left and right, join together and address the source of the issue, which is the criminality of your leaders who pretend that they're going to spread freedom and democracy to a country, or they're going to stop some leader of some country, some Middle Eastern country, killing his own people, which they made up and for which there's no evidence. Stop them doing that, and then blowing the shit out of the country and causing the migrant crisis. Then you get to argue over and divide yourselves. They're basically they go to these countries a lot of times, and they actually, in preparation for an invasion or a bombing of these Middle Eastern countries, they actually spend quite a few years dividing the country, setting up groups to divide the country along religious or other sectarian lines, so that it's kind of ripe for an invasion or an attack. So it's ripe to overthrow the government and invade the country. And that causes the migrant crisis, or the migrant exodus, basically, into European countries. And then that migrant inflow into European countries causes exactly the same division in European countries that they did in the Middle East before blowing it up. And nobody ever talks about this. Nobody ever describes this as this is the source of the problem. That's what everybody, left and right, should be focusing on stopping happening. Yet people are just like sheeple, and they're happy. They're almost willfully or joyfully, dividing themselves into these like trenches, basically, waiting for the shooting to start. And who's not going to suffer in the context where some kind of serious civil discord or war of some description breaks out in a country? Everybody suffers.
In the future, that might be the history of the West in this time. In a nutshell, they went out to give freedom and democracy to all these people, and they lost both. Yeah.
They caused destruction overseas and brought that destruction back home. Why? Because, I don't know. I mean, but again, there's that phrase, divide and conquer. That very old phrase, been known for eons, basically, as a general practice. If you want to conquer a country, the first thing you do is you need to divide the people, the population of the country, divide them against themselves. And the ones sitting on top, ruling the people, then there's nobody complaining about them. There's nobody threatening to overthrow them or oust them or kick them out of office or not vote for them, because the people are fighting each other. Well, but we've talked an awful lot about America there, and kind of get sick of talking about America, no?
You can,
Why do we have to talk so much about America? Why is there so much focus on America?
Oh, the real news is completely missed because we spend so much time drawn to what's going on in one country. In the United States, I mean, it's effectively like a big narcissist. Even not just when it's winning and when things are going good and when there's good news, when it's losing and when some atrocity takes place or some celebrity non-story takes place, it's the dominant thing. Look at me, look at me.
Everybody look at me.
But meanwhile, the real news this week is that for the first time in Western history, a major world meeting between countries took place concerning Syria and the Middle East and regional stability without one of the US or the UK. That's really significant, but it's just a sideshow relative to the freaking hype that's going on nonstop, particularly in the US.
So what is the story?
The story is that Putin and Merkel, Germany, and Macron of France met. They're still meeting, I think. They're in Istanbul.
I think we have a nice picture of them holding hands. Do we have that picture? I think it just says it all. Look at that picture.
Not an Anglophone between them.
Except Macron doesn't look very happy.
Right, he's the least happy to be there because he's the most Anglophone of the four of them.
Is that because he doesn't fancy Erdogan?
He doesn't look happy. He's like, this guy's too old for me.
Yeah, this guy's... Don't you have a younger, darker version of him that I could hold hands with?
If it was Trump, he'd be...
Yeah.
Overjoyed.
So Putin, Merkel, Erdogan and Macron all holding hands in line, all smiling except Macron. And it's basically, a common ground on Syria has been found supposedly, despite years of disagreements on Syria, supposedly, between these four guys, they've worked out a common vision for the steps to reconciliation in Syria. And they all met in Istanbul.
Scroll down there a bit. Can we see some more of that? I want to jog my memory.
Yeah.
It basically hits all the points.
They only want
there can only be a political solution for Syria, i.e. no regime change. Need to start work on a constitution in Geneva. The Russians and the Turks and the Persians, the Iranians, have already got that process underway. No dividing of Syria. Sorry, Israel.
Sorry,
no
America.
chance. Washington, bye-bye. Keep the ceasefire going. That's okay. And defeat the terrorists. Boost humanitarian aid. Help the return of refugees, like from Germany or wherever else they are. I think primarily the vast majority remain in Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan.
Send the refugees back.
But that could include rehousing some of the million-plus refugees in Europe and internationally observed elections. Syria has actually held perfectly valid elections in 2014, but okay, whatever, they stuck that on. Each of those is exactly what the Russians wanted and have been saying all these years. They initially got Iran on the side. Then after the strange year of 2015, 2016 with Turkey and the probably contrived shoot down of a Russian jet, plus the coup that Putin probably saved Erdogan's life in, they got first the Russians, and they got two allies, and now they have two Western people to sign up to the same thing the Russians have been saying. So this is groundbreaking. It remains symbolic, of course, but take stock of what I'm saying about just how symbolic that is. There is no Union Jack in that meeting. There is no Stars and Stripes in that meeting. That is a major development. It remains so only at symbolic level, but still.
Well, we'll see if there's any movement on it, you know.
Yeah.
There has to be movement on it. They've all agreed, and generally speaking, they don't.
It's very difficult to climb down once you've appeared.
Right. They don't stand up like that and have a photo op and agree on that kind of stuff and put out that report without there being without them intending to follow through with it. You know?
This is Merkel acting on what you said in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
When, it's been great. World War II up to today.
Thanks, America.
Thanks.
So long for thanks for the memories.
It's time for us to grow up now, develop our own view of the world and do things our way.
Mm-hmm.
This is it, basically. Yeah. The key actor there is Merkel. It's not really Macron. Macron is miserable in that photo because he's now going to try and have to do a balancing act where he's actually a diehard Anglophile, pro-Israel, pro-empire, pro-establishment figure, but he's having to speak out of both sides of his mouth, and he'll fumble, and the French will be caught up in more intrigue, no doubt.
Exactly.
I still remember that, obviously there was a French frigate, and what was it doing in that incident recently where the Russian plane was shot down? There's still a question over that. The Russians didn't drag them over the coals on that. But then previously, the Skripal case, remember that? In April or so, the Russians presented a series of counter questions in diplomatic notes sent to the UK, and like 14 of the 20 questions for the British government were specifically about French involvement in making the Skripal non-affair happen. So,
yeah, we'll have to wait and see. There's one more story before we wrap up here. Just caught my eye. It's on CNN, but I'm sure it's reported in a similar way on other outlets. It's about your breakfast cereal.
Mine.
Yours, well, maybe not yours, but a lot of people's breakfast cereal. Dozens of common breakfast cereals and snack bars have trace amounts of a controversial herbicide found in the weed killer Roundup. That was according to a report released by an environmental advocacy group, the Environmental Working Group. I think it's a UN group, actually. 26 of the 28 products it tested had levels of Roundup's main ingredient that were higher than EWG scientists consider protective of children's health. Yeah, so we're talking here Honey Nut Cheerios, Quaker Simply Granola Oats, as two examples, but there's 28 that they tested, and 26 of them had dangerous levels of glyphosate, which is a weed killer. I think it's an ammonium salt, but it's not good for you. It's basically a heavy metal. It's like getting heavy metals with your cereals. But the problem, obviously, the implication of this is that breakfast cereals are made from grains.
Mm-hmm.
So the grains have it in them. So therefore, if these people did the similar testing on bread or anything else that is made with wheat or other grains, they'd probably find the same results. And in fact, they have found the same results with something that's made with grains. Beer. There have been studies done on beer and have shown similarly high levels of wheat killer in the vast majority of the major brands of beer. So that's just something to take away, a note next time you're having some cereal or a snack bar or chugging a beer. You're getting some heavy metals with that very likely.
Yummy.
And if you're having it every day, and the problem is, they specifically say that this would definitely be a problem if you're having it continually on a regular basis, on a daily basis for a long time. And of course, a lot of people are having breakfast cereal every day and have been having it for a long time. Maybe most of their lives. And a lot of people are drinking beer on a very regular basis. So it's just something to be. Because basically, it's associated with cancer, which isn't really news. Heavy metals, toxic metals are associated with cancer in your body.
But they undermine every system
as well.
The toxic load is insane, and for the most part, your body can cope with heavy metals by shunting them off into fat storage, which can pretty much be kept out of the way and dormant. But of course, you're going around with all that excess.
We get an overload.
And if you're trying, this is important. If you're trying to get rid of it, I suspect I have some of this going on with me at the moment with exercising. When you start to remove some of those fat stores, anything stored in there is now available in your system, and they'll start to go one by one. But exercise or not, the heavy metal toxic load probably undermines. It's probably underlining systems. Most from the extreme things like cancer, but so many other
anomalous illnesses,
to fatigue, allergies and everything.
Fatigue, general fatigue, like tiredness, lack of sleep, across the board, really. It's the first thing. It's one of the first things to look at. So
it's very simple. Grains are eaten by animals.
Yeah.
Humans eat the animals.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Well, yeah.
That's the order of things. It's unfortunate that we have to kill animals, but there you go. We didn't write this script. That's just the way of life.
And feed your animals, your pet animals, your dogs in particular, and cats. Feed them meat. Give them what they're designed to eat. You probably heard this somewhere on some other show before. This isn't a health and wellness show. This is we're off topic here. But if you ever wondered about whether or not you should give your dog, for example, meat, and particularly raw meat, just consider if you've ever seen a pack of wolves, or if the image of a pack of wolves rampaging through a wheat field, devouring all the wheat. If that makes any sense to you, if you've ever seen a pack of wolves doing that, you haven't, obviously. What they do is they hunt down animals and eat them. That's what your dog is, effectively, genetically, biologically, a wolf, and it's meant to eat raw meat like its ancestors. The same thing with humans, actually. For the vast majority of human evolution, we were eating animal meat and protein. Meat and protein and fat. So, and that's what our systems are evolved to eat. They evolved as they are today on the basis of eating meat. Therefore, they're finely tuned to eating animal protein and fat. Don't listen to the scientists. Well, the scientists now actually have turned around and said that not only is red meat and eggs and butter and stuff not bad for you, you actually need it to be healthy. So they've done a complete 180 on what they had been saying to people for the past 30 or 40 years. Don't take my word for it. Go and look it up. There's plenty of stuff out there in the mainstream about that, of them flip-flopping completely on the evils of red meat and animal fat. So,
amen. Dr. Joe's Pet Corner will be back next week.
Yes, Pet Corner back next week. And that includes,
love your pets, and they'll love you back more. More lovies, more loyalty.
That includes your animal pets as well. Or sorry, your human pets. So yeah. Anyway, I think we'll leave it there for this week, folks. If you like the video, click subscribe, do all that stuff, because
share.
It's good. Share, and we'll be back next week with another show. So until then, have a good morning, evening, or afternoon, or wherever you're at.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.